The Conservation Ecology Centre's had a long history, or a relatively long history in conservation detection dogs, and that's come from having volunteer detection dog teams that were trained to look for tiger quoll, scat and other endangered species. We learnt along the way that the thing with detection dogs is that they're really good at finding stuff if it's there, A, and B, if it's the right target. And so over the years we've been working on, if we're going to use detection dogs, what are the refined questions that they can help us to answer, or monitoring that they can help us to answer? For instance, we worked for a long time looking for tiger quolls, a species at incredibly low density, and we didn't have a lot of success with detection dogs looking for quolls. Similarly, we then started looking for long-nosed potoroos with them, and to find that potoroos were actually dispersing a lot of their scat into the environment, and it was very hard to pinpoint anything. One of the things that we did know that they're excellent at finding is predator scat, so particularly fox and cat scat. And we had been working on some projects looking at density estimation of foxes from microsatellite lifted from scat. So we thought, well, why don't we look at whether there is a comparison here, or we can compare the effectiveness of dog detection teams and human observers for looking at fox scat. So that's what this is about. It was a project that was largely funded by the Department of Environment, DECA, through their knowledge acquisition grants program. And it was part of a larger program, particularly looking at measuring density and abundance of foxes across the landscape. Yeah, that's where we're at. Mark did a bit of the putting together some of the graphs, so if none of it makes sense, it's on him, yeah? Basically what we did, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but we had a couple of established sites where we've been looking at fox density in sites that have either been baited or hadn't been baited in the Otways landscape. Mark published a paper on this. Basically, we were looking at lifting DNA from fox scat to plug into a thing called spatially explicit capture-recapture. Mark's nodding, so I've got the acronym right, which is good. And that gives out a density estimate, which was great, but as I said, we wanted to see if dogs would be more effective at finding the scat along the same transect. So there were two transects of around about 16 kilometres in length, although I think one of them was slightly longer and more uphill, Mark, from memory, when we walked it 1,000,000 times. We surveyed each of these transects 3 times, but we did it once with human observers looking for fox scat and once with dog observers looking for fox scat. We did it humans first, so the humans would walk along and look for fox scat, and if they found one, record it and stick a little toothpick underneath it. And then a dog detection team would come along a couple of hours afterwards and survey this exact same transect and pick up fox scat. And really, we were then these samples were all sent to a genetics lab to do microsatellite analysis to identify individual foxes. Basically, what we were assessing was the number of scats detected, a comparison between dog and human observers, the cost per scat found, and the genotyping success comparing between human observers and dog detection teams. I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second. And then the ability of these surveys to generate data to produce a density estimate using this seeker. Now, there's a whole range of reasons why it's really important to measure density as opposed to an activity index. I'm not going to go into it much today, but basically understanding the real density of animals is a really important thing to be able to do in ecology, especially when we've got landscape scale predator programs being rolled out. We need to understand not only whether there are fluxes in activity across the landscape, but also are we having a genuine reduction in density across the landscape. So that's why we're aiming at methods that can give us a real density as opposed to an index. We worked with Craig Bester from Phillip Island Nature Parks. He has these wonderful dogs that are quite well trained, far better trained than our dogs. I mean our personal dogs. Yeah. So This is what we found. This is just the raw number of scats found per survey, and you can see that dogs have got humans covered. That wasn't difficult. It really wasn't, and it was consistent across it, which was, you know, an expected result. We didn't expect to find anything different. Dogs find stuff better than people. Then the more important question was, of those scats found, were we getting genotyping success from fox scats found by people or dogs? Was there a difference? The importance here is every field sample of fox scat found doesn't always genotype. You can't always get quality DNA from each sample that will tell you what the individual fox is or the individual from its DNA. So there's a real... the question here revolves around whether or not there's any difference and that dogs are finding older scat, for instance, and it's genotyping less well, or vice versa. So basically we were able to find that actually the scats found by dog teams in general was more likely to genotype and be able to identify an individual fox. And we're also able to find more individual foxes from those scats collected by detection dogs, and they also found more returns. So they were actually able to repeatedly find the same individuals more frequently across 3 surveys. So this is really important because those 2 things influence how accurate we can be using seeker or spatially explicit capture recapture. And the other fascinating thing that we found with it was there was very little overlap between what fox detection dogs were finding compared to what human observers was finding. There was actually only 11% overlap. So the other take-home message is there's a whole lot of scat that is not being found every time we survey these landscapes, regardless of whether you're using human observers or dog detection teams. So this is just what those figures look like. So the number of individuals genotyped from scats between human and dog observers on the left, and a comparison of recaptures of individual foxes in consecutive surveys on the right. And again, consistently, dogs are outperforming human observers. Then we want to talk about this as the effectiveness of this method. What is costing more? And we're not so interested in the top number where you're looking at the high efficiency in the dogs detecting. So the cost per survey is far higher for a dog detection team than it is for a human observer. There are obvious costs involved in keeping a dog. But what we're far more interested in is the number of scats on average that are found in comparison, and the average cost of each scat based on that. So as you can see, when you look at the average cost per scat, it's still cheaper for a dog to find each scat when compared to humans because they're finding so many more. And again, if you look at the number of individuals genotyped, or the scats that actually were able to identify individual foxes, again, it is $88 for a dog compared to $135 in human surveys to find the same. The only issue with the cost of dogs is that per survey, they're more expensive, obviously, and they're also generating a stack more scat to be genotyped in laboratory, and that also comes with more cost. So these are the things that we're needing to weigh up. I'm not going to go into all of that because there's a lot of words on the page, but basically what we were able to find to then use that data to generate density estimates using seeker, actually of the 6 dog detection surveys, only 3 of them were generating enough information to give us a reliable density estimate. So it's actually not working well even when we're using the better data set that's coming from the dog detection teams. Only 1 of the surveys from human observers picking up scat was able to generate a density estimate. And then all of the surveys, when they were actually, we were able to generate a density estimate, they were quite imprecise. So basically, we've got a methodology where dogs are much better at finding scat and genotyping, but this is probably not the tool in and of itself to generate density estimates for foxes. We were able to improve the precision of these outputs when we input more data from other surveys of fox scat that were being generated, but this in and of itself wasn't generating high quality density estimates. So that's basically where we're at. I think I've got through it without completely confusing everyone, but I am. But basically, dogs were consistently able to find more scats. They were more reliable in generating scats that would contribute DNA data that would identify individuals. And it was cheaper when comparing the cost per scat to human observers. But each survey was more expensive and led to more processing costs because there were more samples to be sent for laboratory analysis. And this method didn't generate good density estimates like we were hoping in the end. So dogs are great, and the question still remains to make sure you pick the right project for dogs. There are other things to consider when using detection dogs. They require more idyllic conditions. They don't like to work under heat stress. Some of the surfaces that we're working on, particularly on the gravel roads, dogs actually avoid walking on some of the gravel roads because they don't like it. I mean, how soft is that? We, on the other hand, would totally walk on anything. So these are just some of the things that you need to consider when working with dogs. And now I've done what I promised to do and we've reported on it, so thank you. And you can ask me a question as long as it's not mathematical. Yeah, I confused you.
We've got one here, Jack.
Did you ever walk or re-walk a section, like collect the scats and walk it a second time with the dogs to see if you got, another X amount of scats?
Not specifically to test that, but we had to, like you'll remember that I said that humans walked them first and put a toothpick under them, and then the dogs were then second. Now we only picked up 11% of scats that both dog and human observers, so we actually had to go back and find all of those scats again. We often use dogs to do that. In doing so, we often found a stack of scats that everyone had missed. I think in some instances we couldn't find some of the scats that had been toothpicked because the dogs were finding so much other stuff, Ollie. So it was a remarkable eye-opener on how much scat, when you are doing these surveys, it actually gets missed. And one of the weaknesses with the methodology that we were concerned about was whether the dogs would follow the scents of the humans, like they would start to, follow the tracks of people, and it seemed to be entirely irrelevant. All right. Oh, yeah, Matt. You've got to wait for the,
Jack, one of the other issues is likely to be the experience of the observers, the human observers. How do you allow for that?
Yeah, we tried to be really consistent with who they were, but it wasn't always entirely possible. But you're totally right. And, I think we account for the fact that you're going to miss a lot of scat, and we probably, in the end, even our best observers were missing 90% of it, Matt, so it sort of almost became an issue, but an irrelevant one considering how much was left in the landscape. But, yep, shocking how much was missed, I reckon, and so obvious when you go and find it.